Thank you and good morning, everyone. I'm Estelle and I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Arctic Shores, and it's a real pleasure to be with you this morning. And it was also a real pleasure, although maybe that's not quite the right word, to see the two problems to solve and the two challenges that came top of the poll that Natasha ran at the start of the session this morning. And I hope that what I'm going to cover and speak to you about, what we're going to discuss today, is going to provoke you maybe to think about how to solve that challenge of attracting more diverse candidates, and also help you to see and assess the quality of candidates that you're seeing in a slightly different way. This is actually me 25 years ago. It's obviously not my official graduation photo, but I think it's a much more authentic shot of how I felt that day. You can almost see, if you look closely, the whites of my knuckles gripping my certificate and the slightly goofy happiness and celebration of the occasion. The joy of not just having got through the finals, but the strong sense I had that day of feeling that my 2-1 law degree from Edinburgh University was my golden ticket to a fairly exclusive pool and roll of jobs. Roles not open to those less privileged or fortunate to have a few letters after their name. Fast forward 25 years, and that ticket doesn't necessarily look quite so golden anymore. CIPD survey from last year suggests that 2 out of 5 employers are no longer mainly looking for a degree or postgraduate qualifications. And that number is on the rise. In part, that's because there's a growing body of evidence that suggests that academic qualifications are actually an extremely poor predictor of on-the-job success. But in spite of the evidence that there's a loosening of ties to that 2-1 or even any degree requirement, there is an other equally false friend to which we all remain pretty much addicted in recruitment. Our poison? Experience. And even though that we might have a feeling that experience-based hiring is not doing a brilliant job for our people, our candidates, or our companies, and indeed, there is also a growing body of evidence that previous experience is an equally poor predictor of future performance. Let's be honest with ourselves. Most of us remained pretty fixated at looking at campaigns and candidates through that lens of previous experience. Even when we know that a human being screening a CV can have up to 150 different biases in action, we seem unable to step away. And I would argue that the CV and traditional application formats that are already under pressure for creating hiring bias should now firmly be on the recruitment scrap heap, thanks to ChatGPT and generative AI. And a major challenge for all of us as recruitment leaders that really should be that wake-up call to our experience addiction is that because of digitisation and advances in AI, although there are 855 million jobs that will be lost by 2030, according to the World Economic Forum, there are another 97 million entirely new roles that don't either even exist today or certainly didn't exist 5 years ago. So by focusing on that narrow talent pool that might exist in those areas, competing for those same candidates that might have that experience, we're causing spiralling salaries. And the hard and difficult truth for us all is that if we keep hiring on how we've always been hiring, based through that lens of experience, you're radically reducing your chances of success. Furthermore, our obsession with experience-centric hiring is exacerbating that diversity divide. How do we make the changes that we want to see in terms of diversity if we could keep looking to the same pools with the same experience. Of course, I wouldn't want to be the person under the knife or the passenger on the plane of the surgeon and pilots if they were hired purely on the basis of potential. And for most roles, experience might also be relevant. But what I am arguing is that it should not be the central and single factor in finding the best talent. And that the reason that most companies, even some who've scrapped the 2-1, still take an experience-centric approach to recruitment is that age-old rationale. Well, we do it that way because it's the way that we've always done it. A combination of all of these factors were fundamentally what drove Arctic Shores to completely rethink how we hire, to move away from experience-based hiring and towards hiring for potential. And the incredible results for us in that shift then triggered some really fascinating conversations with some of our customers. And we wanted to take what we'd learned and to support those customers in making that shift too, to escape the experience trap and to hire for potential. And the story that I want to share with you now is how we did that on a pilot basis in partnership with Siemens. And I want to share with you the impact that that's had. And this is a project that we carried out in January and February of this year. So as Natasha mentioned, our executive sponsor of that project, John, he's sadly not in the room with us today, but sort of like the BAFTAs when the winner can't make it to the awards ceremony, John's recorded a number of videos that I'm going to share with you over the next 10 or 15 minutes. So why don't we hear first off why John decided to embark on this whole journey of hiring purely for potential.
I have a real interest in finding the best potential for the roles that we have today and tomorrow in Siemens, and I think like many businesses we found it really challenging to find the best available talent in recent times. We have an excellent talent acquisition team in Siemens, and we've used very standard traditional methods which have worked in the past. And more recently, the numbers of people that we've been attracting, maybe has stagnated. We've seen some challenges of the gap between attracting the right people and taking them to interview, and then even down to making a job offer. It's very competitive out there. So I think there's a theory that if you keep doing the same things, you're going to get the same results. So working with the head of talent acquisition, I wanted to do something just a little bit different. Siemens worked with many partners in this space, and I know we've worked with Arctic Shores historically, particularly around early talent. My roles weren't necessarily early talent, they were more mid-professional type roles. One came available, and what the heck, let's go for it. We connected with Arctic Shores. Jen Boyle came and did a superb presentation to my leadership team back in November, and from that point conversations started to spin out, and working with the team we commenced to expand the relationship. When you're in a competitive space, everybody is going with their bucket to the same well for the same water. Very static type of individuals, both in terms of diversity, skill set, potential and experience, which makes it more competitive and makes it more challenging to find the right candidates. So we wanted to go to a different well with a different bucket and to tap into a different pool of individuals. The initial criteria of the pilot was to increase the level of attractiveness of the roles, a greater propensity from attraction to the final phases, and ultimately the success was to have a pilot that we could understand what we can learn from as well. So we were not too concerned with making it absolutely perfect. In a way, we wanted things to go wrong so that if we did expand the project down the road, we could learn from that and continue to make it better under the interests of continuous improvement.
So the specific role that we piloted was a project engineer. It was a vacancy that had been open in Siemens for 200 days with no sign of the position being filled. And aside from filling this business critical role, Siemens also wanted to create an efficient, a fair and a data-led recruitment process that would enable them really, as John said, to find out what would happen if they switched from their old way of doing things to this new sort of potential-centric approach. So we worked through a 6-stage process together, and to really ensure that that focus of the recruitment campaign was focused on potential and that ran through every stage of the process. Everything that I'm about to share with you and all of the details are in this playbook, which you can pick up from our stand. There's also lots of tips and templates and links to other sources. And really this kind of captures what I'm going to give you an overview of. So the first thing we had to do was really to change the mindset across the team. We were very mindful, we were asking for a big change. We redefined in the second step what success looked like, and we reworked the job description. We then ensured that the job advert aligned with the job description and became more of an invitation to apply, not a tool to screen out candidates. In the fourth step, we established a selection process that measured what matters. And then in the fifth step, an interview approach that empowered hiring managers to interview in a way that discovered candidates' potential rather than quizzing them on their past experience. And finally, we ensured that the process fully respected the candidate across the entire process, because we all know how important that employer brand and that candidate experience is. So this is just the playbook that I've shared with you. You can also download it as well, and I'll share a QR code with you at the end of the presentation. So in terms of changing mindset, we did 3 things with Siemens to support John in this pilot. We presented the concept, the approach and the potential benefits to the senior leadership team and to the hiring manager. And we then ran with them a workshop to really expose the challenges and limitations of the CV and to explore other methods of screening. Because if we were going to get rid of the CV, we had to create an alternative way to measure what matters. And finally, we decided to recommend a pilot, an A/B approach. So what we did on campaign, we had the old job advert and the old approach, the old job description, and we put that out in the marketplace. And then at the same time, we took the reworked potential-faced job advert and job description, and we put that out in the marketplace at the same time. So let's hear John's reflections on the first step of that process.
There'll always be internal skeptics, and if I take us back to where Jen presented to the organisation, you can see people shuffling in the chair a little bit. I guess, you know, when you're asking people to scrap the CV, forget about 25, 30, 40 years experience, because that's what we've got in Siemens. There are always going to be people that maybe raise a question. But even people that have got 25, 30, 40 years of experience, there is a chance that potential could change. Just because you've done a certain role for so long, it means that you can maybe change a different path towards the more twilight phase of your career. So this is not all about early talent. So I think with any change process, it's about having a good story. It's having a clarity on the outcome that's required. And being very, very open with people as you go through that process. Keep telling the stories as we build a success, which is what we've been really good at in Siemens.
So the first part of what we aimed to do then was really to completely redefine the project engineer role. And not in terms of the task or the experience or the qualifications, but in terms of potential and success criteria for future success in that role. And I guess this is really best exemplified then in the job description. This is where everything had to start. So Siemens began sharing with our team of business psychologists the original advert, which you can see a shortened version here. And just to take you through this a little bit, and I guess it's very typical of the standard approach to JDs and to adverts. So you can see in the top section a set of tasks that define the role. The tasks are specific. And they refer terms, there's reference to terms in there that someone without any experience of project engineering would really struggle to understand. And there's nothing there, there's no reference to the sort of behaviours or aptitudes that might underlie success in this role. And the second section was the person specification. And here, what we had was that list of qualifications, such as project management, trainings, skills, as well as experience with Microsoft Office suite. And the problem here is twofold. Firstly, the job advert is being used as a method to screen out individuals who don't have a particular specific background. And second, it neglects a lot of the important success criteria in terms of what soft skills and aptitude a candidate might bring to the role. So we transformed the job description, and with that then the advert. We started by going through a collaborative job analysis that allowed us to move away from tasks and specific skills and to move to what really matters for potential future success. The success criteria a candidate would need to really excel in that role. And we talked about it in a language that anyone from any background could understand and potentially see themselves in that role. And actually, we even changed the job title from project engineer to entry-level project manager to open up the doors to the very first thing that candidates would read about the role. And then when it came specifically to the job advert, we needed to be bold and upfront that you didn't need a CV or a specific set of experience, even a degree. We were transparent with the salary, and we all know the research on the benefits of doing that. We championed the training and the career development in the job advert. And as I've said, the overall aim was that shift away from screening out to an invitation to apply. And what was the impact? So we ran the old advert, 83 applications. The new revised advert, 533 applications. Result, we'd widened the funnel and got a huge number of applications. And so the challenge then was to ensure that we selected candidates with the right potential to really measure what matters and find a fair and scalable way to review all of the applications. And obviously, if you're scrapping the CV, you need to introduce additional data points to uncover the candidates who might fit the role. And we found that the most effective approach, and indeed what we did with Siemens, was to have two specific data points to replace the CVs. Some subjective questions and then an objective measurement of how a candidate will perform. So the overall process looked like this. The key was to get an understanding of behavioural, soft skills, cognitive abilities, and the candidate's motivation. And there were two parts to it. Pre-sift. So an Arctic Shores task-based assessment, not a self-report psychometric assessment, but an assessment that uses neuroscience and what takes up to 5,000 data points looking at how the candidate completes some online tasks, not an assessment of what they say about themselves. And then we also asked candidates to answer only four quite open questions, which again were all about understanding their motivation and their potential and their alignment with the company's mission and values. Having screened in candidates based on their potential, we then wanted to give them a chance to bring their capabilities to life in the interviews. No point in having gone through that effort and all that work if the interview then just interrogated past experience. So we worked really closely with Siemens to ensure that bias wasn't reintroduced into the process and that the hiring manager process was consistent and objective. And we were really mindful that even without the subjective biases from CVs, interview questions can inadvertently favour certain groups or individuals with particular experience. And again, the goal wasn't about catching out candidates, but about providing them the opportunity to explain more about their natural strengths that they had revealed in the previous stage. And just here's an example of how we did that. So you might remember from the job advert that planning and delivering were two success criteria that we'd identified as being important. So this top question was the one that we posed, not a question that was, give me an example of a time when blah, 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 blah. The final step in the process was really about having this culture and thinking about respecting the candidate. And I think you can probably see from what I've explained that the process or the experience for the candidate in the potential, the B group, much more positive and inspiring and exciting and motivating than the traditional approach. But we also wanted to add in two specific things around this. Making sure that we provided accommodations for those with specific needs, and ensuring that the campaign conveyed a psychological safety for candidates to share their requirements with us. And then the second element was about providing meaningful feedback to each candidate. And the only way that we could really do that was by having an assessment that had a candidate report that gave direct and time and quick feedback to the candidate, which was personalised but also scalable. So I've given you a little flavour of some of the results along the way, but let me give you the full picture. So I mentioned that we got 533 applications through this new way of doing it. Of those applications, sort of right to work screening, etc., we invited 306 candidates to apply and to take the Arctic Shores task-based assessment and to submit answers to the 4 questions. The quality of candidates was so high that 63 candidates scored above 80% in the assessment. And on the basis of how they completed the assessment and that score, we then assessed only those candidates' written questions. Their written answers, I should say. 8 of those candidates then progressed to a potential focused interview, and not by any sort of playing with numbers, but we had 4 men and 4 women. Of those 8 candidates, one was an assistant manager at Aldi, another was working at Kentucky Fried Chicken. These were people who had incredible transferable skills, but would never have been able to demonstrate those but for the CV-less hiring approach. And there was also an internal candidate who had come into the business on an apprenticeship programme and who said he would never have applied for that position. He just wouldn't have been able to apply for that position had it been based on experience. Siemens ended up creating 2 posts and offering 2 candidates a job. And from a time to hire perspective, the entire process was 41 days as opposed to Siemens' typical campaign time to hire, which is around 80 days. And this was just some of the impact in terms of efficiency. I've mentioned to you the increased number of applications that we had, but just in the process, rather than screening of CVs or traditional application forms, by using technology in the assessment and then a short questionnaire, Siemens reckon they saved about 242 hours. We had 100% hiring manager satisfaction, and this quote is from the hiring manager. And this one that I particularly love. Every single one of the 8 shortlisted candidates would have been screened out using the old experienced focused process. And finally, we got great feedback from the candidates in terms of their own experience. So let's hear from John one last time about what you can expect if you switch to hiring from potential.
We've been absolutely over the moon with the number of candidates that applied for the role that we applied the Arctic Shores process to. So that initial attraction phase from the Arctic Shores designed job advertisement was way beyond expectations. The beauty for us is that we had the opportunity to run an Arctic Shores trial and a standard Siemens trial side by side. So there was a real clear benchmark there. And we are talking nearly 300% increase compared to the Siemens route from the initial attraction phase. From the pool of talent that we were looking for, we narrowed that down to a number of just north of 300 candidates, which is unheard of for the role of entry-level project engineer that we were recruiting for. Which left a real big task then of how we take the behaviour assessment and the benchmarking in terms of to take for interview, where that line would be. Typically it falls around about 60%. We had to lift that to 85%. The quality of the candidates was so high. Because ultimately we wanted to narrow that down to 8 candidates that we would take through to the interview stage. And you know what has been absolutely fantastic with the Arctic Shores process is that from job advertisement through to interview, that the guidance and coaching that you've given us on all of the requirements at each of the stages of the recruitment process has led to such a strong success. So we've got 8 candidates. When I talked to the recruiting managers, they would have taken all 8. Of the 8 final candidates in this pilot role, none would have made it through the traditional Siemens route when we are relying exclusively on experience and the CV. I mean, that has been probably one of the biggest successes of the whole process. I also think one of the things that I've taken real positive vibes from as well is that of the 8 candidates that we managed to narrow down to, there was a perfect gender split of 50-50. So there was no adaptation of that or no additional filter to get down to that point, but clearly the job advertisement, the behaviour assessment, the preparation of the interview questions, that enabled us to get that blend and that diverse pool that we were looking for. And clearly the increase of diversity equals your greatest pool of talent and potential that you can tap into.
So just to wrap up then, there's a clear business case for escaping the experience trap and hiring for potential, for moving away from a dependency on backwards-looking CVs towards using measure of potential. In doing so, you can remove the restrictions on the talent pool and open up your funnel to a broader and more diverse group of people. You can hire an objective, data-driven way to ensure you're not baking in bias to the process using technology. And in doing so, you can lower costs and ensure a shorter and more predictable recruitment timeline, while at the same time creating a much better candidate experience and enhancing your employer brand. But as well as a business rationale for escaping the experience trap, I think there's also a clear societal one. The UK consistently performs poorly on international comparisons for both social mobility and inequality. Recent research has shown that it's taking more than a decade on average for women to return to their pre-maternity salaries and status levels. For every 100 men promoted to managerial roles in the UK, only 87 women are promoted to the same roles. In our country, the employment rate is only 63% for ethnic minorities, and the unemployment rate for autistic adults is 78%. These are complex problems, the societal problems to solve behind each of these statistics. And I'm not suggesting that hiring for potential is the silver bullet to hire them all. But I do posit to you that thanks to the latest breakthroughs in neuroscience, psychometrics, psychology and data science, there is a much better and fairer alternative to screening candidates. And that by shifting mindsets in your organisations from being experience-centric to potential-centric, that you'll be benefiting not only your organisations, but society as a whole. Thank you.